Have you ever felt like you're running, but not away from danger? Just away from something silent, something inside? Maybe you've tried to quit, the drink, the scroll, the screen, and maybe you did. For a while. But something always pulled you back. Not the thrill, not the pleasure, just the pause. That brief moment when the war inside you finally quieted. This isn't just a video about addiction. It's about that ache you've never quite been able to name. The one that hides behind your productivity. The one that whispers at 2 a.m. when everything else is quiet. And the truth? It has less to do with what you're using, and everything to do with what you're running from. Because in part 4 we'll talk about why your lowest point might actually be sacred. And in part 7, why your healing doesn't mean becoming perfect, but finally becoming whole. I remember a man I met once in a small recovery circle. He said, "I didn't drink to forget. I drank to stop pretending. Pretending I was okay. Pretending I wasn't screaming inside." He wasn't chasing the bottle, he was chasing silence, peace, something sacred. If you've ever felt like that, even once, leave a comment saying "me too," not for the algorithm, but so someone else out there knows they're not alone. Are you ready? Let's begin. You've been lied to. They told you addiction was a failure, a defect, a moral weakness wrapped in excuses. They said you just needed more discipline, more willpower, more shame. That if you really wanted to change, you would. But what if everything you've believed about addiction was wrong? What if addiction wasn't about weakness at all, but about hunger? A hunger so deep, so ancient, that no amount of shame or science could erase it. What if addiction is not the sign that you're broken, but that your soul is screaming? You see, we live in a culture obsessed with symptoms. We pathologize pain. We medicate mystery. We dissect suffering into diagnoses. But Carl Jung saw through it. He said addiction isn't a disease, it's a failed spiritual quest. It's a desperate attempt to feel alive in a world that tells you to be numb. To feel whole when everything around you says fragment. Let that sink in. Addiction isn't about chasing a high, it's about chasing home. And that home? It's not a place. It's a presence, a remembering, a reunion with the parts of you that got buried under masks, expectations, and years of pretending. This isn't to say there aren't consequences, there are. Real, painful ones, but if we only focus on the behavior, we miss the message. And addiction always carries a message. It whispers through cravings. It echoes in relapses. It screams in silence. "I don't want to die," it says. "I just don't know how to live like this anymore." And maybe that's you. Maybe you've looked in the mirror and wondered, what's wrong with me? Maybe you've sworn today would be different, that this time you'd stop, that this time you'd finally feel okay. But it's not about stopping, is it? It's about understanding, about listening. Because you can't heal what you still hate, and you can't change what you won't name. So let's name it. Addiction is not the enemy. It's a mirror. It reflects the pain you've buried, the stories you've swallowed, the needs you were told were too much. It's your soul's last resort, saying, "If you won't feel me, I will force you to." And that's terrifying. Because no one teaches us how to feel. They teach us how to perform, to comply, to cope. So we scroll, binge, inject, drink, anything to not feel what we were never allowed to feel in the first place. But here's the truth. You don't need fixing. You need remembering. Remembering that you are not your worst moment, that you are not defined by a bottle, a needle, a screen, or a craving, that beneath every addiction is not a sinner, but a seeker. And that seeker, they've been walking through hell hoping to find heaven in all the wrong places. That's not weakness, that's human. So if you're watching this, and part of you is whispering, "This is me," listen, not to me. To that part. The part that knows there's more. The part that's tired of numbing. The part that's been waiting for someone to say, "You're not alone, and you're not beyond redemption." Because what if addiction was never the point? What if it was just the path, crooked and painful as it may be, that led you back to yourself? What if the real story wasn't about what you lost, but what you're about to reclaim? And what if, just maybe, the silence you've been craving wasn't absence, but presence? The next time someone tells you addiction is weakness, ask them this. Have you ever been so hungry for meaning that you mistook poison for medicine, And when they look confused, just smile, because now you know better. But here's the real question. If addiction isn't the enemy, and what is? That's what we'll explore next, and the answer might just change everything. You've probably heard it 1,000 times. They just want the high. They're addicted to pleasure. They're chasing a rush. But here's the truth most people never see. Most addicts aren't chasing pleasure. They're chasing silence, not the silence of an empty room. The silence of the war inside them finally stopping. Because for many, the chaos isn't outside, it's within. It's the noise of shame, of stories unspoken, of wounds that never healed. It's the hum of, "I'm not enough," playing on repeat beneath every conversation, every accomplishment, every quiet moment alone. And when that noise gets too loud, the craving kicks in. Not for euphoria, for pause, for one sacred second where everything just stops. Think about it. If you're in pain long enough, even numbness feels like relief. And that's the real hook of addiction. It doesn't offer joy. It offers escape. It offers a break from pretending, from holding it all together, from being the version of you that smiles when you're dying inside. So when people say they just need to stop, they're missing the point. Nobody wakes up one day and thinks, "You know what sounds fun? Ruining my life." What they want is quiet. What they're starving for is peace. And here's the cruel trick. Most substances don't deliver joy. They deliver disconnection, a temporary detachment from the pain they don't know how to process. That's why people go back. Not because it works forever, but because for a moment it does. It drowns out the noise. It blurs the shame. It gives them 5 minutes where they don't have to carry the weight of their unspoken truth. And those 5 minutes, they feel like air to someone who's been underwater too long. But that air comes with a cost, because the more you numb, the more your soul forgets how to speak, and the more you forget how to listen, until the only thing louder than your craving is your silence. Let me ask you something. Have you ever done something, not because you loved it, but because it let you disappear for a while? That's what addiction really is. Not desire. Desperation. Desperation for a moment without the mask, without the pressure, without the constant pretending that you're fine. So maybe it's not about what you use. Maybe it's about what you're trying not to feel. And maybe the next time you reach for that thing, whatever it is, you can pause and ask, what am I actually needing right now? Because you might find it's not pleasure, it's presence, it's peace. It's to not have to be on all the time, and that is not weakness, it's honesty. The world doesn't need more people who are fine. It needs more people who are real. So if this spoke to something in you, leave a comment and just say, "I get it." You don't have to explain. Just let it be a moment of truth between you and someone else who needs it. Because in part 3, we're going deeper, into the real source of that noise you've been trying to escape. The part of you you've been taught to fear. The shadow. There's a part of you you've spent your whole life avoiding. Not because it's evil, but because at some point someone taught you it wasn't welcome. That part, the one that gets angry, that feels ashamed, that remembers what you try to forget. That's what Carl Jung called the shadow. And here's the truth most people miss. Addiction is the shadow speaking. It's not the substance acting. It's the exile within you finally screaming. Because what you reject doesn't disappear. It waits. It simmers in silence. It gathers in the basement of your psyche until it explodes, not in words, but in behaviors you can't explain. You ever felt like something else took over? Like you were watching yourself do the thing you swore you'd never do? That's not weakness. That's your shadow, finally demanding to be seen. And this is where most healing efforts fail, because they try to eliminate the behavior without listening to the part of you behind it. They want to fix you before they understand you. But the shadow doesn't need fixing, it needs integration. Let me say that again. You don't heal by destroying your shadow. You heal by making peace with it. Jung said, the gold is in the shadow, which means all the parts of you you've buried, your rage, your grief, your desire, they aren't your downfall. They're your doorway. They carry not just pain, but potential, fire, creativity, truth. But as long as you demonize them, they'll only ever show up as addiction, because the soul will not be silenced. And addiction is what happens when your pain is forced to speak in code. So how do you begin? By turning toward what you've run from. not to fight it, not to fix it, but to listen, to the anger you've swallowed, to the shame you've denied, to the grief you've minimized for the comfort of others. The shadow isn't a monster, it's your humanity, begging to be honored. And once you stop seeing your shadow as the enemy, the whole narrative changes. You stop asking, why am I broken? And you start asking, what part of me did I leave behind to survive? That's a different kind of question, one that doesn't shame you, one that frees you. Because once the shadow is seen, not judged, it stops hijacking your life from the dark. You stop acting out, you start showing up. And the behaviors that once felt uncontrollable, they begin to soften, because the part of you behind them has finally been heard. That's why Jung didn't believe in punishment. He believed in wholeness, not perfection, wholeness. So if you've spent your life trying to amputate pieces of yourself just to be accepted, this is your invitation to stop. You were never meant to be fragmented to be loved. You were meant to be seen fully, even the messy parts, especially the messy parts. And if this feels like truth, even a little, take a moment and comment, I'm ready to face it, not for me, for you. Because in part 4, we're stepping into the darkest moment, but also the most sacred, rock bottom, not as the end, but as a beginning. Rock bottom, 2 words that feel like death. To the world it looks like failure, like disgrace, like everything collapsing at once, the job gone, the trust shattered, the mirror cracked beyond repair. But what if rock bottom is sacred? What if it's not the end, but the beginning? Carl Jung believed that transformation doesn't begin with success. It begins with surrender, and surrender only comes when there's nothing left to perform, nothing left to prove, nowhere left to hide. That's rock bottom. Not because you've fallen, but because the masks have. It's the moment when the lies stop working, when the distractions run dry, when even your excuses don't believe themselves anymore. And in that silence, brutal, raw, unfiltered, something ancient awakens. Not your ego, not your image, yourself, the real one, the one you buried under survival, the one you forgot existed, the one that never left. Rock bottom is the death of the performance. The strong one, the perfect one, the I've got it together one. All of them collapse under the weight of your unspoken truth, and while that collapse feels terrifying, it's holy. Because now, for the first time, you're face to face with reality, not the version curated for others, the one that simply is, and in that moment you're not punished, you're purified, stripped of pretense, emptied of illusion, ready for something real. Every myth, every spiritual path, every rite of passage speaks of this moment, the descent into chaos before the ascent into clarity, the underworld before the resurrection, the darkness before the dawn. What's dangerous is not hitting rock bottom. What's dangerous is hovering just above it for years, numb, distracted, functional, never truly falling, never truly changing. Because transformation requires collapse, not physical, spiritual. The breaking of the shell so the truth inside can breathe. You may feel lost, but the truth is, you're finally being found, not by someone else, by you. And that's why Jung called this a symbolic death, the death of the addict's identity. So the real self can rise. That's not failure. That's initiation. It's not the day your life ends. It's the day the performance does. And what comes after is rebirth, but only if you don't run. Only if you stay. Only if you listen to what that rock bottom is really saying. Because beneath the rubble isn't ruin. It's the foundation for something sacred. So if you're there or close or remember what it felt like, leave a comment and just say, I'm still here. Because that's everything. And in part 5, we'll talk about the one thing you've been chasing all along. Not happiness, not success, not love. Silence, the kind that heals. It's not about the high, it never was. The thing most addicts crave isn't intensity. It's absence. Absence of noise, of judgment, of expectation, of having to hold it all together when you feel like falling apart. What they're chasing is silence. Not the kind you hear with your ears, the kind that descends inside you when, for one sacred moment, you stop pretending. Pretending you're fine, pretending you're strong, pretending you're not unraveling inside, Because here's the truth, most people aren't addicted to substances, they're addicted to relief. From the storm of guilt, confusion, shame, fear, the noise that lives in their bones. Addiction isn't about wanting more. It's about wanting less. Less pressure, less pretending, less performance. In a world that constantly screams, be better, be stronger, be someone you're not, the addict longs for one thing: stillness. A pause from the noise that never stops. Because when you've been drowning for years, even breathlessness can feel like breathing. You've probably felt it too, even if you don't call it addiction. That desire to disappear for a while, to turn it all off, to not have to be on. And for a few minutes the substance delivers. It works until it doesn't, until the silence it offers turns into another kind of noise, the noise of consequences, shame, regret. But that craving, that original hunger, it wasn't wrong. It was holy. Because the soul needs silence, it needs space to speak, and in a world built on noise, silence becomes a rebellion, a refuge, a return. You don't need more stimulation. You need stillness, not silence that numbs, silence that heals. The kind that comes when you finally stop running, when you sit with the discomfort and hear what it has to say, when you let the grief rise, let the shame speak, let the rage be acknowledged, and then, slowly, you begin to hear something else. Not the craving, not the chaos, but you. The you that never left. The you that always knew. And that kind of silence? No substance can offer it because it's not a product, it's a presence, one that returns only when you stop outsourcing your peace to something outside of you. So if part of you has always been craving something quieter, gentler, more honest, you're not alone. Leave a comment and write, "I just want peace." Because that longing is not weakness, it's wisdom. And in part 6, we're going to name what no one wants to admit, that the substance was never the real problem. It was a substitute for something sacred. It's easy to blame the substance, the bottle, the needle, the pill, the screen. It's tangible, obvious, measurable. So we say, that's the problem. But here's the truth nobody wants to face. The substance is never the real problem. It's a substitute, a stand-in, a desperate attempt to fill a hole that no one ever taught you how to name, let alone heal. Because the addict doesn't crave the thing itself. They crave what it gives them, or what it pretends to. Relief, connection, control, a brief illusion of wholeness. And when life has taught you that your pain is too much, that your feelings are inconvenient, that your story is too dark or too messy, you learn to medicate your soul the only way you know how, so the substance becomes the ritual, not because it works, because it's there. Because when you were alone with your shame, it stayed. When the people left, it offered presence. When your truth felt too heavy to carry, it numbed it just long enough to survive another day. And that's why people return. Not because they love it, because they fear what life looks like without it. Not the external life, the internal one, the noise, the ache, the unanswered grief. And maybe you've felt that too. Maybe you've tried to quit. Not just the substance, but the behavior, the pattern, the escape route. And every time you did, something deeper rose. The emptiness, the questions, the memories. And that's the real struggle, not withdrawal. Re-entry. Re-entry into a world that still doesn't know how to hold you. Into a body you've been at war with. Into a soul you haven't trusted in years. So you go back not to the high but to the numb. Because numbness at least feels like a plan, like something. But let me say this. What you're trying to escape is not who you are. It's who you had to become to survive. And what you truly need, what you've always needed, is not detox, it's meaning. You need something sacred. Something strong enough to hold your grief. Something alive enough to speak to your hunger. Because no amount of quitting will heal what you never understood. And until you realize that the substance was just a shadow of what you're really missing, the cycle will keep repeating. You're not addicted to the object, you're addicted to the feeling it provides. And even that is just a placeholder, a symbol for something holy that got lost along the way. So if you've ever looked at yourself and thought, why can't I stop? Maybe it's time to ask a different question. What am I actually seeking? And if that question stirred something in you, drop it in the comments below. Even if the answer isn't clear yet, because in part 7, we're going to talk about what healing really looks like. not quitting, but coming home. You've spent years trying to cut pieces of yourself away. The anger, the shame, the grief, the craving. You believed if you could just amputate those parts, you'd finally be free. But what if the real work isn't in cutting things off? It's in calling them home, because healing isn't about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. Addiction thrives in fragmentation. When you split yourself in two, what you show and what you hide, something inside begins to break. And the more you hide, the louder the hidden parts become. They start to speak through cravings, through sabotage, through relapse. Not because they want to destroy you, because they want to be seen. And that's what Jung meant when he said, "You do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." The real work is integration. It's sitting with the part of you that binges and saying, "What are you trying to say?" It's holding the part that lashes out and whispering, "I'm listening now." It's embracing the shame, not as truth, but as a story that needs rewriting. You see, those rejected parts, they hold power, not just pain. Your fire, your creativity, your intuition, your truth, they were never meant to be erased. They were meant to be reclaimed. And the moment you stop fighting your shadow and start learning from it, the addiction begins to lose its grip. Because now you're no longer at war with yourself, you're becoming whole. And wholeness doesn't mean perfection. It means nothing is exiled anymore. Every part belongs. Every part has a place. Every part is loved into healing. That's when things change. You stop seeing yourself as a problem to be fixed and start seeing yourself as a story to be heard. You stop surviving by suppression and start living with connection. And this isn't easy, it's sacred, it's messy, it's real. But it's the only path that leads somewhere new. So if you've ever felt like you're made of fragments, like you've left pieces of yourself scattered across years of hiding, know this. You can gather them. You can return. And every piece you bring home makes you stronger, not weaker. Leave a comment and write, "I'm reclaiming myself." Because in Part 8, we're going to talk about what lies beyond addiction. Not just sobriety, but meaning, purpose, wholeness. We've been told the goal is abstinence, just stop, just quit, just say no. But what if the goal is wholeness? Because quitting is not the same as healing. You can be sober and still be split, still ashamed, still disconnected. Carl Jung didn't believe in merely stopping behaviors. He believed in becoming someone new, not through willpower, through meaning. Because when you discover meaning, true, personal, embodied meaning, addiction loses its power. Not because you fought harder, but because you no longer need to escape. This is what most recovery misses. They hand you tools, steps, slogans, and those can help. But if they don't help you integrate your story, your rage, your grief, your joy, your shadow, they'll never touch the root. You'll stay in maintenance mode, always managing, never transforming. But real freedom doesn't come from managing your pain. It comes from understanding it, from turning toward it, from listening to what it's been trying to say all along. You're not here to perform healing. You're here to live it, to feel deeply, to speak honestly, to build a life that no longer requires escape. That's the shift. That's the rebirth. When the part of you that once ran from the fire becomes the one who walks through it, head high, heart open, and what you find on the other side isn't perfection. It's purpose. Not the kind you read in books, the kind you feel in your bones, the kind that says, "I know who I am now and I don't have to hide anymore." So if you're here and something in this journey has resonated, know this: you are not broken. You are being reborn. The substance was never the point. It was the signal. The pain was never punishment. It was a portal. And the healing? It's not about becoming good. It's about becoming whole. So let this be your invitation, not to just quit, but to integrate, to find your symbol, to name your shadow, to reclaim your voice, to step back into your story, not as a victim, not as a sinner, but as a soul in search of truth. If you've made it this far, take one more step. Leave a comment. I'm ready for meaning. Because that's what you've always been seeking. Not relief, not numbness, but something that feels real, and now maybe you're finally ready to receive it. Welcome home.